Today, we're going to dive into some really fascinating new research that's uncovered a surprising and, let's be honest, a little concerning link between a common heavy metal in our environment and our brain health.
I mean, think about that question. It really gets to the heart of what a lot of us worry about, staying sharp. We're always thinking about diet, exercise, and genetics. But what if there's something else? A factor we're exposed to every single day without even knowing it, and it's playing a role. So yeah, let's explore that idea. We're going to look at this totally unexpected environmental factor that new science is suggesting could be impacting our brains in ways we're only just now beginning to understand. Okay, so let's meet the main character in our story today. Its name is cadmium, and it's a toxic heavy metal that's probably a lot more common in our environment than you'd think. So what exactly is this stuff? Well, cadmium is a highly toxic heavy metal, and it's a known carcinogen, which is obviously not great. But here's the really sneaky part. It has this ability to just build up in our bodies over our entire lifetime. It doesn't really leave. And cadmium isn't just sitting there quietly. Oh no, it's active. It can seriously mess with the calcium levels in the brain, which are crucial for normal function. It can kickstart inflammation and even cause our precious brain cells to die. And this is a big one. It can actually cross the blood-brain barrier. You know, that protective wall around our brain. Cadmium can get right through it. As Dr. David Murrell puts it, the danger here isn't really from one single big exposure. See, cadmium has a really long half-life, which is just a scientific way of saying our bodies have a very, very hard time getting rid of it. So it can just build up slowly over years and years. And eventually, that's what can lead to cognitive problems.
And this brings us right to the new research that's really shining a spotlight on this whole issue. So let's get into the evidence. All right, so a brand new study just published in the major journal Neurology is the reason we're even talking about this. Now, it doesn't claim to have all the answers, but it does suggest there's a real link between cadmium exposure and problems with our thinking and memory.
And this wasn't some tiny little experiment. We're talking about over 2,000 people here, from all different backgrounds. Researchers followed them for, on average, 10 years. And during that time, they were constantly tracking their health and doing regular thinking and memory tests.
And here it is, the headline finding. What they found was that for the white participants in the study, those who had higher amounts of cadmium in their urine had a doubled risk of developing cognitive impairment. Doubled! That is a massive statistical leap. But this is where things get a little more complicated, and frankly, a lot more surprising. That link, well, it wasn't consistent for everybody, which led the researchers to a much more nuanced place. So while they found that really strong connection for white participants, the exact same link was not found for the black participants in the study. Nothing. And this really puzzled the researchers and led them to a specific hypothesis. It just goes to show how critical it is for future studies to figure out the different sources of exposure. The study authors have a theory. They point out that while overall cadmium levels were pretty similar, the white participants in this particular group had smoked a lot more throughout their lives. And since cigarette smoke is a huge source of cadmium, they think that might be the key factor that explains the different results. Now, this brings us to a super important point in any kind of science. This study shows an association. That just means that two things, higher cadmium and cognitive decline, happen together in one group. It does not prove causation. We can't say for sure that the cadmium caused the decline. It's a critical difference. And Dr. Merrill's point really hammers this home. These findings are like a big red flag, a signpost telling scientists, hey, look over here, dig deeper. But we're not at the point yet where we can prove a direct cause and effect relationship. We just need more research. So, of course, this leads to the next big question, right? If this metal is a potential risk, where are we actually getting exposed to it in our everyday lives? Well, the sources are pretty varied and, unfortunately, pretty common. We already mentioned that cigarette smoke is a major one. But it's also in polluted air from industrial sites, it's used in some agricultural fertilizers, and from there, you guessed it, it can seep into our food and water. You can actually trace its path right to our dinner plates. It often starts in the soil, which gets contaminated from industry or those fertilizers. Then crops that we eat all the time, like rice, wheat, leafy greens, they absorb that cadmium right out of the soil. So when we eat those plants, or maybe fish that came from polluted waters, that cadmium comes right along with them. It's a subtle cycle, but it's persistent.
And as nutritionist Melanie Murphy-Richter explains, this is a clear environmental chain reaction. It's a process that starts out there with pollution and can literally end up in the food we eat. So, after looking at all this, what's the bottom line? What are we supposed to take away from this new piece of the scientific puzzle?
The main takeaway is this. The study adds another important piece of evidence to this growing field of research that connects environmental toxins to our brain health. It puts cadmium on our radar as a potential risk factor that really deserves more attention and a lot more investigation.
But let me be absolutely clear. The message here is not to panic. It's all about having perspective. This is science in motion. It's still evolving. When we understand potential risks, that's the very first step toward finding solutions and making better choices, both for ourselves and our environment.
And that really leaves us with a final, huge question. If a heavy metal we barely ever think about could have this hidden link to how we think, what other surprising connections between the world around us and our own health are just out there, waiting to be discovered?